Hi everyone, welcome to our Embark webinar. I am Cecily Mitchell. I'll be hosting today. I'm going to share my screen with you guys, so just bear with me for a second. I'm going to make sure that you guys can see my presentation. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see where it says Embark by Calo webinar. So we will go ahead and get started. I thought I'd start with introductions. So since you guys can't see me, it'd be nice to know who's at least talking to you, right? So I'm Cecily Mitchell. I am the Director of Embark. I have been with Calo for 3 years. Prior to being the Director of Embark, I was a therapist for the teen program. So got some good experience under my belt with our attachment kiddos and developmental trauma, and I'm just really excited to be sharing my knowledge with you today. I thought I would go ahead and also introduce Rob Gent. He's on the call, but he probably won't chime in too much today. He is our Chief Clinical Officer for all of Calo Programs, and a lot of the material that I will be touching on today, he has created, and it's part of our proprietary model. So I just want to be sure that I note that because it's just really fascinating and great stuff, and I like to share it with people. We also have a guest appearance from a former parent. Her name is Sherry. Her son was in our residential treatment program, and then she also has done an intensive, so she can speak to both sides, which is really great. So she will be chiming in throughout the webinar today. I'll be asking her some questions, and then if you guys have questions for her, I'm sure she would be open to answering those also towards the end. So just some logistical things to cover. There's a couple of places where you can ask questions. At the top of your screen, there's questions that are public in there so everybody can see them. And then there's questions on your left-hand side that are just to me. So if you have something private that you want to ask me that I can maybe address via email or through a phone call afterwards, I would go ahead and ask it privately in there. But you're welcome to ask questions all throughout the presentation. I won't address them during the presentation because actually on my side of the screen I can't even see them. But I will address them at the end when we get to that. So you'll see a couple of images here on the side, and those are just some teasers of some information that's coming down the pipe to you guys. So what is it that we are covering today? So if you'll remember from your invitation, there were 3 bullet points. What are the key components of our family intensives? What families can benefit from Embark, and how our assessment provides pivotal information for next steps. So that seems pretty straightforward, right? Maybe not. I'll let you guys be the judge of that one. So I want to start with the key components of our family intensives. So on the right-hand side here, you'll see a model. This is the Embark model. So what we do is we have clinical immersion, intensive assessment, and trauma integration, with the goal being relational healing. So what does that mean and what does that look like? We'll go into it a little bit further, but I wanted to explain that image. Okay. So the 3 key components, if you take away nothing else from this webinar, the 3 key components of our family intensives are time, experience, and individualization. So what is it that I mean about that? Well, first of all, time. Let's start with that one. So 1 week of Embark is worth years of therapy. So let me back up for just a second. Our intensives are either a 5 or a 10 days long. So essentially saying 1 week of therapy is a year's worth actually fits, because in 5 days we're going to spend 30 hours with you doing therapy. That feels significantly different than 1 hour a week. and we're solely focused on you. I'll go into that in a little bit. So the next one is experience. We're pairing education with experience to solidify the neural pathways. So we want to stay congruent with our model. We don't want to just give you the cognitive knowledge and not give you the experience to follow it up or back it up. So by pairing the psychoeducation in the intensive, but also practicing it, coaching you through it, providing you with the experience at the intensive, that allows for you guys to really solidify it in your neural pathways. And the third piece is individualization. So let me be clear. This is not a workshop format. It's one family at a time. So when you come in town to do an intensive with us, you come here and we are focused on you. You walk through the office, you're the only people in the office with us. So all of our attention is focused on you, and we're really intentional about having you come to us too, because it gets us away from distractions. So at home, if we were to come into your house and do an intensive there, there's the option to storm off to the bedroom and slam the door and hold up in the bathroom and go outside, and of course we're going to take breaks here and make sure that we're meeting everyone's needs, but hopefully everyone's cell phones are put away, and if they're not, we're going to address that. And if you need to check your phone, then we're going to take a break to do those types of things. So it's really individualized and really focused on one family at a time. And the other piece about individualization that I don't want to forget is that if you've had a lot of therapy, great, we can go at a faster pace. If you haven't had a lot of therapy, then great, we can go at a slower pace. So that's the piece of individualization too. So Sherry, could you speak a little bit about your experience with your intensive with your husband and your son?
Absolutely. I think, well, first of all, we all claim, my husband and I both claim that the intensive saved our family. I really think that my son had been at the Calo Teens program prior to our Embark experience, but it was that one-on-one for a period of time that helped us so tremendously. Being in weekly therapy, while that was great for us, by the time we got through the details of the week, the session was over. So there wasn't a lot of time to really start to utilize those tools, which I think that from the minute we arrived for the Embark program, we were so whooped that we felt so well taken care of. We arrive at the condo, it's completely stocked with food. There's snacks, there's drinks, healthy snacks, unhealthy, you name it, it was there. And I say that because, coming there, we were exhausted. And it was just one less thing that we had to think about. We felt so well taken care of. But back to really the guts of the program, I think the one-on-one was so beneficial for us because I think that it gave the clinicians a chance to see how we functioned as a family. My son had a meltdown there, and to watch, as parents, to watch the clinicians provide that empathy and then get him to come out and participate and then have us role play. Well, we weren't role playing, we were in it, experience the empathy, and they were kind of able to guide us in how we were doing it right, how we weren't, some of the things that we were doing wrong. I think that was the key. It was just such closeness, and it felt safe because we were able to share some really deep feelings, my husband and I and my son, and we felt that there was no judgment and that they were there completely for us.
That's great. That actually reminds me of another family that we had that said we do follow-up surveys, and on his survey he said it was the first time he ever felt like there wasn't a ticking clock behind him. like that we were actually
Mm-hmm.
able to focus on them, and it wasn't like, okay, great, now I have to go to my next client. And that's truly how we want it to feel every single time.
I can definitely say that's how it felt for us, that there was plenty
Good.
of time to work through all of our issues.
Great. So Sherry kind of did a great job of painting a picture of what the intensive kind of looks like. So let's climb inside it a little bit further. So what does it look like? We are going to give you practical experience that's guided by our trained clinicians. So what that means is we're going to provide you with new communication tools that are actually going to work. So think about all that you've been doing now. Maybe it feels like it hasn't been working. How do we shift that and provide you with something that is going to work? And when we're working with adolescents especially, or any sort of developmental trauma, there's resistance that comes into play. And so how do we calm the brain and calm the resistance so that we can get to the root of what is actually happening? So there's a lot of modeling that takes place. So we're going to do it first, sort of do it for you, then we're going to coach you, do it with you, and then we are going to really want you to do it. So it's really a three-pronged process. We want to make sure that you see it, you're coached through it, and then you feel confident that you can do it. And when you don't, what's great is that we're there for you to look at us with kind of those deer in the headlights and go, uh-oh, the wheels are getting off the track here, what do we do? And we're there to come in and help and guide. So you don't know what you don't know until you do, right? And so we want to be able to provide you with that knowledge. So, Sherry, I'm pulling up the CASA house and the relationship continuum. So both of these are going to look really familiar to you. So what was it like when we first started talking about the relationship continuum with you and your family and having that be a framework?
I giggle here because this was by far one of our biggest takeaways. You can see the arrow on the screen where on the left is the unhealthy attachment, and then I feel like our son is a constant pendulum between unhealthy attachment and healthy intimacy. Certainly before we got to the program, was definitely in the unhealthy. I would say that with developmental trauma, it takes a lot of time and patience because we see great glimpses of healthy intimacy, and I'll tell you, when we have that, what we get from our son are great conversations. We get details about his life. He's able to share his feelings, and that's when we increase the privilege. There's flexibility, there's connection, there's able to be repair between, for some of the things that he's done in the past, real repair. And when I say that, we've gotten a lot of I'm sorry before, but I'm talking real repair. The unhealthy attachment, which occasionally he swings back to, but my husband and I now, we whip this piece of paper out constantly. It should be ingrained in our brains by now, but we always refer to it. Ours is torn and tattered. But that unhealthy attachment, when we see him pulling away and we ask him questions and we get one-word answers, like, how's your day? Fine. Are you going out tonight? Yep. That type of thing. We're like, what's going on here? Okay, he's sliding to the left. So that, it kind of triggers for us, okay, we can unconditionally love him, but we've got to keep those bottom lines in place, and we kind of decrease the privilege and focus on safety and those bottom lines, and really the bottom lines for us is another great thing that we discovered at Calo, which I'm sure you'll get into in a little bit, but this has been a lifeline for us. And my husband and I talk about it all the time. We're like, we don't even say the words anymore. We're like, is he on the left or is he on the right? Is he on the left or is he on the right? We're constantly evaluating because we want to be able to provide that safety for him.
Right. So you bring up the bottom lines. And so to touch on those really quickly, we want all of our families to construct bottom lines while they're at our intensive. And essentially what those are is, what are the 10 bottom lines to live in your home? They aren't people specific. So if it was for my house, they wouldn't be specific. They would be for everyone. If someone moved in and was a roommate, it would apply to them. So it's really and truly the bare minimum to live within the home and not those nice to haves. So, when you are in an unhealthy place, those bottom lines remain the same. But even when you are healthy, the bottom lines remain the same. They're constant. So that always seems to be a really big takeaway. So I like that you brought that up, Sherry. So I won't go into a whole lot more detail about the relationship continuum here, just because I want to be mindful of the time and make sure we get through everything. But the relationship continuum and the CASA house, these two really are the foundational pieces of what we do at the intensive. So when parents show up, we provide them with a workbook, and these are in them, and each parent gets one, and that way they can make their own notes in there, and they can write it all up, and then 99% of the time by Friday, parents are like, can you email us a copy? We'd like to have a clean copy that's not written all over. And we're happy to do that too. So that way you have, multiple copies. Sherry just mentioned ours is all torn up. I just emailed her another copy, so she has it. So we want to make sure that you continue to have the tools. Okay, so I'm going to read this quote to you because it really encaptures what we do at Embark. Safely sharing emotions creates experiences of intimacy and connection, which decreases shame and negative core beliefs and increases a sense of self-worth, resulting in reduction of suffering caused by painful emotions. So Dan Siegel is a really highly researched man in attachment, and that's something that he said, and it really captures what we are doing at Embark. We're going to safely explore the really difficult stuff because we've got the time to do it. Okay, so I want to touch on empathy before strategy because this is another inside of the intensive quote that I repeat myself over and over. So let's just pretend for a second that we're sitting in an intensive, and you guys are going to get my full spiel of what happens. So you see this hand model on the right-hand side of your screen. This is Dan Siegel's hand-brain model, what I'm going to walk you guys through. So essentially, if you hold your hand up like it's on the screen and tuck your thumb in, the brain develops from the stem up. So your wrist is your brain stem. Into your thumb is your limbic system. This is your emotional center. And then you wrap around to your fingers, and that's your prefrontal cortex. Now, if you wrap your 4 fingers around your thumb, it actually does a pretty good job of looking like a brain. But most of our kids tend to be stuck in their limbic system. So what we want to do is, I'm going to explain that a little bit further, is we want to break the communication pattern during the intensive. And we really want to speak to the emotional brain. So what does that mean? And how do we do it? So we're going to go towards that limbic system, right where that red circle popped up. And we're going to emotionally speak for them. So that means we're speaking in first-person language. If I'm you, now they will probably say, oh, don't be a therapist with me. Oh, don't therapize me. They come up with all these funny words for what it feels like when a therapist does therapy-like things to them. But this is what truly works to help calm the brain down. So when they're stuck in their limbic system, it's actually called flipping their lid. Their actual prefrontal cortex isn't online because of the brain development is not fully developed even until 27 in a neurotypical brain. So then you throw developmental trauma in there, and it means that their development is slowed down even more. So they're stuck in their limbic system, and we actually have to communicate with the limbic system in order to calm the brain down. So this is empathy before strategy. We want to use that first-person language, because how many times have you tried to strategize with your child and you see that glossed over look that happens in their eyes, or their eyes rolling, or they totally tune out. They can't hear you, and that's a good indicator that they are in their limbic system. So we want to use the empathy before the strategy. It allows them to feel felt, which ultimately calms the whole system down, which leads to co-regulation. That's exactly what we want, is to co-regulate with you. They're not in a place to regulate themselves. So going to their room or isolating or getting on their phone or their computer or whatever else, that's not actually regulating their brain in a way that is going to ultimately lead to healthy connection. So we want to use empathy before we strategize with them and come up with solutions. Believe it or not, I've seen it work over and over and over again, but it is a true paradigm shift. It is difficult. This is my language, and I do it day in and day out, and there are times where even I catch myself of like, oh, I'm in strategy right now. And you have to back up and slow yourself down. So Carl Rogers, one of my favorite people in grad school, he has always said, empathy is necessary and sufficient. So for my analytical dads, that is usually a tough one. But I want you to sit with that for a second. Empathy is necessary and sufficient. Unfortunately, the limbic system doesn't hear ration. As many of us wish that we could rationalize our children to death till they hear us, they actually need us to speak to them with empathy in order to create times where they can be rational and bring the rest of their brain back online. Okay, so what families can benefit from Embark? This is the second bullet point that we'll address. So if you are a family that is experiencing communication difficulties, feeling stuck in current therapy, having major dysregulation at home, or maybe it's not happening at home, maybe it's major dysregulation that's happening at school, or you're questioning what the next steps are. Oh, maybe we need to go to wilderness, maybe we need to go to residential, maybe we need boarding school, maybe we need therapeutic boarding school. Well, maybe we need IOP. I mean, if you are in that place where you're just not sure and what you're doing isn't working, Embark is for you. We want to bring you here and do an assessment. Hey, actually, with these tools, you guys can manage it at home. Or, hey, actually, you know what? There is a lot of work that needs to be done here, and the quickest way to do it is wilderness or residential or boarding school. I mean, of course, there's tons of options, but we at least want to set you up with a framework for home. And if you can't do it at home, then great. Now we have a bunch of other resources for you guys of places that you can go, or can connect you with people that can help you find other places to go. So we see ages 8 and up. That does include young adults. So and it doesn't mean they have to be adopted. Of course, adoption is one of our specializations, but we had a 24-year-old biological child that came that was struggling to launch out of his house, and he hadn't left his bedroom except to eat dinner in like 3 years. So he came and did an intensive with his parents, and it was wonderful, and he's actually doing significantly better now. But we've also seen all the way down to a 9-year-old boy who was adopted from China. So it's just, this is where individualization really comes into play, is that we can meet you guys where you're at, and if there's stuff going on, great, let's explore it. So if any of you are internal families that are on the call, so I'm sure you're thinking, well, I could benefit from this, but when is the right time? So if you feel stuck in therapy, that happens. Even in residential, you can get stuck. This is great. Kind of my sweet spot where I like to do it is between 6 and 8 months of therapy. That means they've been there, they're primed, they know the model. They're usually in a good spot to do some good work about them. That's where I like to do it. It doesn't mean it happens like that all of the time. So we've done it on the front end, we've done it on the back end, we've done multiple intensives. So again, another situation where we can get really, really individualized. One of the parents said it gave us the framework and the experience paired up together. So it felt like they were able to go, oh, okay, now we know the model, but this is how we practice it, and this is what it looks like. Okay, so the third bullet point is assessment, and that's really what you're going to get at the end of the intensive. So you'll see this nice image here that's of the brain. So when you come and do a 5 or a 10-day intensive, we do QEEGs. So you can see down here there's white, which is kind of normal brain matter, and then we can go standard deviation 3 all the way up, which would be above normal function, and then 3 standard deviations, which is below normal function. So we're going to measure where things are at within the brain and then use neurofeedback to train those areas of the brain to try to get them into that band of regulation. So the reason why I include that picture is because you will get those images in your assessment. So it's nice to see those, and it's nice to take them to where you're going next and for them to be able to see it. If we do a 10-day, we usually do a pre and a post QEEG, so you can see the changes, which is always really fascinating. So really the assessment, we're going to talk about next steps, what resources, connect you with people that are going to know your community better than we do, to really find resources that are in your area if you're able to stay home. We want to do follow-up with you guys, so it doesn't mean that when you end at the 5 days or the 10 days that it's done. We want to follow up with you guys. We want to be a support system. So that maybe that means connecting with your current therapist and sharing the work that we did and sharing the model that we use so that they can have a better understanding and can integrate it into their practice if they're open to that. It can be follow-up sessions with you guys. If you don't have a treating therapist, we'd love to follow up with you until you do have someone at home. We don't want to leave you without a therapist. So maybe that means we do a couple family sessions for a few weeks until we find someone at home for you guys, or you guys find someone at home. And then continued work as needed. So what does that really mean? I mean, I think Sherry's a great testimony to it. She and I were chatting before the call today, and she was like, I always kind of call when we just need to bounce some ideas off of you and make sure that we're on the right track. And it's not that they aren't confident in their skills, it's that they just need the reassurance. So I love that, because when parents leave us, I always say, if you need anything, call us. And I truly mean that. If something comes up, call us. Let us be a support system to you. We do not want to leave you high and dry. So Sherry, I know you've shared about your experience, but what do you think was the most beneficial thing about Embark for your family?
I guess I would say the most beneficial thing for us was understanding our own history. I think that Steve and I came in with what we thought was a great understanding of ourselves, and that my son was the one who needed to be fixed, or continued to be fixed. And we thought we had done a lot of work on ourselves, but really being in that family intensive setting, I think what was most powerful for him and I was understanding our own history. You know, my childhood was turbulent growing up, and so I was desperate for peace at all costs. And I found myself, when things got heated at home, I would, drop the bottom lines. I would get soft and let things go because I wanted peace. my husband grew up in a home that there was not a lot of love. His physical needs were met, but there was not a lot of love and support. And so he was desperate for connection and love. So, I would watch him chase my son. I mean, literally, like he could not get enough of him, and our son wanted nothing to do with us for a long time. And so he felt like he was a failure. He felt defeated. All he wanted to do was go fishing or coach a sports team, like that kind of thing. And our son wasn't available for that. So understanding who we were and how we were getting triggered, as a family, like if there was challenges that arose, we had to take a look at that. So we left Embark and we made a commitment to each other that, we're not always on the same page. And that was a big part of our challenge. And so we made a commitment that we really needed, when things were going, when our house, when Dimitri was offline and flipped his lid, we needed to get together, come together with an open mind, sit down and talk about how we were going to lead in. We're going in with empathy, but what does that look like? Okay, once we get his brain back online, what are the consequences of his behavior? Like, we had to kind of come together on that. And we had to really come with an open mind because we're both coming at it from different. I'm coming from the heart, he's coming from the head. And then we agreed to seek counsel, extra counsel when needed. I'll give a great example of when my son was arrested last summer. He was going to prison, and we knew it was the right thing to do to not bail him out because he had exceeded our level of care. And probably the hardest decision I think we've ever made. And I get teary thinking about it because you think a traditional family would never leave their child in prison. But we knew we were doing the right thing, but we picked up the phone and we called a Calo clinician and said, we need help. This is what's going on. This is what we think we should do. And just that reassurance that we had somebody saying, yes, you are doing the right thing. He has exceeded your level of care. You can still love him unconditionally and support him, but you cannot bail him out. And it was the best thing that ever happened to us. The connection that we were able to develop when he was in prison was like nothing we've ever experienced. And he's 21. So I think that understanding our history, making the agreement that we need to be open-minded and get on the same page. It's not Steve's choice, it's not my choice, but we need to be a unit that is not divided, and then to seek extra counsel when needed were our biggest takeaways.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem.
So just to recap, what is Embark by Calo? We are 5 or 10-day intensive therapy focusing on developmental trauma and adoption. We offer neurofeedback, canine therapy, heart rate variability, brain spotting, family therapy, and it's going to be repetitive and rhythmic and relational, and the purpose of that is to solidify it neurobiologically. So you hear Sherry telling her story, and we had to repeat it over and over and over again, and that's okay because they needed it in their neurobiology too, and that is the purpose of it, is so that we can solidify it for you guys. And then safe relationship so that we can ultimately lead to integration. So creating the safe relationship with you guys as therapists, but also helping parents to create safe relationship with their child so that they have integration later on in their life as they move forward and work through their trauma. So I have a funny story about safe relationship that actually is with Sherry's son, and it was just an indicator of how safe he felt with us. And so it was about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 6 months after they had been home after their intensive. I don't really remember the timeline really well. But I got this phone call, and it was from Dimitri. And I was like, well, that's weird. Something must be going on. So I answered. And anyway, Dimitri was like, I'm having some problems at home with my parents, and I'm not really sure what to do. Can you help me? And I said, well, sure, but you got to tell me what's going on first. And he's like, well, there was this situation with Hercules, which is his dog, where he had had an accident in the house. And Steve had gotten upset, and Sherry had gotten upset, and everybody was yelling, and they were talking to Dee, but they were talking pretty loudly to him. And for Dimitri, one of the bottom lines that he wanted was no yelling, because for him, that was a trigger, and it just, sensory-wise, he couldn't handle it. And that's something he really needed from his parents. Now, being an East Coast family, they were yellers, and so that was a tough one for Sherry and Steve to sometimes manage. I think that's fair for me to say, Sherry.
Absolutely.
But they knew it was important to Dee, and so they worked really hard to not do it. And so he's like, anyway, they were yelling, and they're breaking the bottom lines, Cecily, they're breaking the bottom lines. What do I do? And so he and I worked through it. First, we talked about, well, what's it like for you? What's the emotional experience? And we talked and shared about that. And then I said, well, what's the solution? And I didn't have to give him a solution. He already had it. He said, I'm going to have to call a meeting with my parents. I'm going to have to call a meeting with them, and we're going to have to talk about it. And I said, you're right. You are. So he didn't even really need me to give him any information, but the safety and the relationship allowed for him to come back online and come up with that conclusion on his own. So we want to be able to do that with your child, with you guys, ultimately just to provide this experience for you guys where you feel safe enough to truly heal. So what are the 3 takeaways or the 3 major things that you will experience from Embark? Time, experience, and individualization. You will have our undivided attention. You will gain the knowledge and the experience, and it will be specific to your family. So we're not going to be preaching all this information to you that just feels like it could apply to anyone. We're going to do real life stuff of, see, this is what's happening with your child when we're talking about this, and we're going to integrate your story into it to help make sense of things. If you see this picture on the right-hand side, I just have to tell you guys about this for a minute. So this is my family therapy room in Springfield. We just opened this office because some of the things that parents had mentioned to us is that they really wanted it to be closer to an airport. So we're 12.5 miles from an airport now. You can fly into the Springfield-Branson National Airport, drive straight to the office, show up, and this is our family therapy room. This is where we would sit and do therapy. You can see the sun shines in. You can see the CASA model that's on the wall because we're going to spend a ton of time talking about that. You can actually even see my snack tray that's over there on my little table. You're going to be taken care of. There's going to be snacks and drinks and a refrigerator with anything you could imagine as far as waters or juices, and there's a coffee maker and there's tea, and I just want to make sure you guys feel absolutely taken care of while you're here. So this is your spot. This is where we would be, and I want you to be comfortable. So to wrap it up, please visit our website for more information. You can find us at www.embarkbycalo.com. It's almost finished getting updated, and we'll have pictures of all of the office space and even a 3D walkthrough on there so you can really get a good sense of things. And then if you need to find me or you want to speak to Rob, our Chief Clinical Officer, these are our emails, cmitchell@ca-lo.com, or you can find Rob at argent@caloprograms.com. Thank you guys, and I actually I'm going to back out of my presentation here, and I want to open it up to questions. So feel free to start asking questions if you haven't already. Looks like we've got a couple coming in. Okay, so the first one is, how do we know when to do this? So that's a great question. I think when to do it is call us, consult with us. Let us know what's happening, and we can give you a better sense of things. We want to make sure that you guys are safe, so making sure that, we're not suicidal and that safety is key. So if you're questioning it, probably the time is now. How do we talk to our child about doing this? That's a great question. So I would be honest and share, as a family, we're going to go and do some work together, and this is what it's going to look like. I wouldn't keep it a secret. I wouldn't spring it on them the day before. I would give them as much notice as you know. That way you can talk about it, and there might be a meltdown. And if you need to have a Skype session with me to put a face to who they're going to see, I'm happy to do that kind of stuff, or to jump on the phone. That wouldn't be uncommon. I've done that before. So
Cecily,
here's another one. Yeah.
Can I jump in for 1 second?
Sure.
I think that when we introduced Embark to Dimitri, Steve and I told him, this is a family program that, we were like, Dave, Mom and Pop, we're doing the work. You've done a lot of work, but we're here to do the work too. And I think it makes it less scary because they get a sense that we're all in this together. And to be honest, my son laughed and was like, good, you guys need it. It kind of cracked me up. But he was right, actually. We all need it. But I think it took this, it wasn't, there's something wrong with you, son, so we're going to go away and do this week. It was, as a unit, we need to function differently, and we need some tools and help. And he received it a lot better. So
absolutely.
So thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that, Jerry, because that actually addresses the next question is, what do we do with a 16-year-old boy who does not want help or doesn't want to go anywhere for treatment? And I think what you said is just perfect. We are going as a family, and it's not do you want to go? It's we're doing this. And it's not to be forceful, but it's that you care enough about the family and that you're doing it together. And I love Dimitri's response. That doesn't surprise me out of him. That's pretty cute. Okay, another question is, are siblings also a part of therapy? Great question. That is case by case. It depends on what's happening with those other siblings, what their ages are. Of course, a sibling is going to throw in a whole nother dynamic, and oftentimes we'll feel like we're working with two kids, which we're not opposed to, but just want to figure out, well, what are your goals and what's the focus? So if there's one kid that's more, I guess, like outward in their emotions and responses to things and their triggers, then the other, that doesn't mean the other one isn't suffering, but, what's the goal of the parents and how do we address that? So again, that's where we can get really individualized and creative. I have several coming up that are siblings, and actually siblings that are part of our residential program, and so we're doing some of it with just the child that's not in residential and then incorporating the child that's in residential also later on. So that's where that individualization and creativity really comes into play. How far in advance do families need to schedule? I usually am booked about 2 or 3 weeks out. So I actually try to keep my calendar that way for a reason, because I know a lot of people in the past have wanted to do it but needed it more immediately than we were able to offer. So this year we've worked really hard to keep our calendar from being booked out too far, so that way we can accommodate people that need a quicker turnaround time. So if you want to contact me, or I can actually reach out to you after this too, to figure out what looks good and what you're thinking of, we can certainly look at that together. what is the pricing for a 5-day and a 10-day? So pricing for a 5-day is $13,900. That includes your stay, stocking your fridge with groceries, your lunch for the 5 days during the intensive, and also all the therapies that take place. So remember, that's 5 hours of therapy a day with 2 therapists, plus neurofeedback twice a day, plus QEEGs for everybody that's in attendance. So it really covers all of the cost for those things. And I'm sure a question coming after that is, what about insurance reimbursement? And there it is. And we do submit to insurance after the fact, and are starting to do some pre-authorizations to figure out what we can get on the front end also. But right now we are submitting after and working with families to get as much reimbursement as we can. Of course, that depends on everybody's plan and what that looks like. And we can't guarantee anything, but we've got a great UR department that's been working really hard to answer all of the parents' questions and make sure that we're doing everything that we can. So happy to explore that with you all also. What are the accommodations like? So what we do is, this is really, we're going to provide you with a home that meets the needs of your family. So for instance, I'm going to find a VRBO or an Airbnb that's nearby the office. I don't pick anything that's more than 15 minutes away. I want it to be nice and comfortable for you guys. I don't want you staying at a hotel because that gets cramped, especially when we're doing family therapy. You guys need space to relax and breathe. So I do want it to be a home. So for instance, a family that came a few weeks ago, it was a brother and a sister and a mom and a dad, but the parents were in the middle of a divorce. So they actually needed a 4-bedroom, and I was able to accommodate that for them in a very comfortable setting. So, you know, we want to meet the needs of your family, so just communicate with me, you know, who all's coming and what you guys are needing, and I'll make sure that you are taken care of. Okay. How do you help parents that can't pull the trigger for treatment? That is an excellent question. So Embark is really great for parents who can't pull the trigger for treatment because I think it feels a little more temporary than a potential placement as far as like wilderness or residential. But what's really nice is that it really sheds light on just how significant the issues are. So the parents, if they're hesitant to pull the trigger, we're either going to provide them with tools because they can handle it at home, or we're going to provide them with tools and help them figure out next steps because it's too big to manage at home. And usually by the end of the intensive, they're like, oh my gosh, we cannot do this at home. We have got to do something different. And that does happen. So this is really perfect for those parents that can't pull the trigger but would be willing to come as a family to do something like this. So I'd be happy to connect with you further if I need to speak with them or connect with them. Our framework is that our goal is always to keep every family home. If we can keep them home, then that's what we want to do. But if they're exceeding the ability to be safe at home, then we want to help you get the help that you need. If you feel like you're being the police in your own house, they've exceeded the ability to be at home. So those are the things that we can talk about with parents and then really explore with them the pain and the loss and the grief that comes with having to send your child away, because that's huge. No one has a child or adopts a child with the intentions of sending them away. That's never a parent's reality. And then when it becomes their reality and their truth, it's devastating. And so we explore that with parents and that loss. These are all great questions, by the way. You guys are doing wonderfully. So just to recap, the ages that we will treat is age 8 and up. I don't really cap it on an age limit because I think everybody can benefit from Embark. You know, we're happy to incorporate your therapist at home. I don't know that there's a wrong time to do Embark. If you're like, well, when's the best time to do it? I don't know what the wrong time is. So, I mean, really we get to get creative. And we're happy to incorporate siblings. But again, that's a case by case. So let's talk about what's the family's goals. What does that look like? Is there huge sibling conflict? Is that going to be the biggest bulk of what we focus on, is the sibling conflict? How do we address that? Is the 10-day intensive continuous days, or is there a break on the weekend? Excellent question. So it's 5 days, a break on the weekend, and then 5 days. And the goal in that is that at those 5 days, the first 5 days, that's usually more of the psychoeducational and the model and getting things down, and then the last 5 days becomes more like the practice and the integration. So what's nice is to have that break in between and give you guys a moment to breathe, and then we dive back into it. So what's really great too is that Springfield is a really family-friendly community, so there's lots to do. There's places to hike and ride bikes. If you're interested in doing outdoor stuff, there's plenty of parks. If you enjoy rock climbing, there's an indoor rock climbing place that's huge, actually. There's a really cute mini golf place. There's plenty of places to eat. There's lots of healthy places to eat, too. Lots of mom and pop stuff that's down here. Bass Pro Shop was founded down here in Springfield, and so they just opened Wonders of Wildlife, which is a huge museum and an aquarium that's really interesting. So there's lots of stuff to do if you're worried about, well, what are we going to do on those 2 days off? We'll provide you with some homework assignments, but there's also things that you can do to connect as a family. So, you know, that way you can be playful and be silly, and because those things are important. I've got somebody that's asking for emails again. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull up my PowerPoint and leave the emails up on the screen. So that way you guys can see it and write it down and have some more time with it. And if anybody wants my phone number, my office line is 417-851-1720. You're welcome to leave me a message there if I don't answer, and we can set up a time to talk about things and you know, explore what it is that you're needing. Okay, what happens after you leave Embark? Report, follow-up, etc. So after you leave Embark, we put together an extensive report of our time together. It goes through some family history, really an assessment of our time that was together. It includes the neurofeedback information, and then it has some goals for treatment. And we provide you with that report about a week after the intensive, and we're going to review the report with you to make sure that it's clear and that you don't have any questions. And then if you guys want us to follow up with your treating therapist about that report, we're happy to do those types of things and happy to continue to do some follow-up work as well. So we're not going to leave you high and dry. Like I've said a couple of times already, I don't want you to feel like the 5 days ends or the 10 days end and you don't know what to do. You should leave feeling like you have a plan and have some things that are going to be implemented at home, and also know what next steps are going to be. All right. So if you guys don't have any more questions, go ahead and wrap it up about 5 minutes early, unless anybody has any questions that are specific to Sherry. or Sherry, if there's anything else that you feel you want to make sure that our audience hears.
I guess the thing that I want to make sure that everyone understands is what a game changer this is for your family unit. Because my husband and I are able to use these tools, you know, my son has not healed 100%, but we're able to use the tools to reach him, and we have longer periods of time where things are great for us. And when they're not great, we're okay. You know, before we used to kind of fall apart and we were so enmeshed that we were down when he was down. But because we have these tools and a deeper understanding of developmental trauma and tools to use while he's in, you know, that place on that continuum of unhealthy attachment, we're okay because we understand it. And I think the takeaway, the education that we got there was priceless. You know, I mean, really, it was an investment for us, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. So I think
Thank you.
that's the biggest thing I want to write home.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sherry. I mean, it's my favorite thing to hear from parents, to hear about how meaningful it was. And that truly becomes our joy to experience that and be a part of that with you guys. I mean, I love, as much as you reach out in times of desperation, there are times that you reach out in joy too, and I love that. I love that the relationship has continued so that we can continue to hear from you guys and know how you're doing. So just to solidify for you guys, the 3 takeaways are time, experience, and individualization. We want to work to create change that is everlasting and a truly ingrained template. It's a truly revolutionary way to do therapy. It is not done like this very many places, and we are proud to be doing it like this and hope that you guys will get a chance to experience it. So please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. My email is here on the screen, cmitchell@ca-lo.com, or you can call me on my office phone, 417-851-1720. Thank you guys so much, and have a great day.